Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. I think we all know that keeping your faith strong and your finances straight can be a little tricky, especially right now. It's tough for everyone. But today we're going to dive deep into finding that sweet spot of balance.
Yeah, finding that balance is something a lot of people are talking about, especially millennials and Gen Z.
Absolutely.
Yes.
We're taking a look at a Christian podcast episode that really dives into this. It's called 5 Biblical Lessons for Millennials and Gen Z to Overcome Financial Hardships Without Compromising Morals.
Catchy title.
Right. And they don't waste any time getting to the heart of it. They start talking about that pull toward easy money, even if it means kind of bending your morals a bit.
Yeah.
Like they actually use this crazy example of imagining you're so broke that you'd think about selling a kidney just to afford those fancy vacations and designer clothes you see everyone else with.
Whoa. Okay.
That's it.
Tense.
Yeah.
Right.
But it makes you think.
Definitely. It shows you how much pressure young people are under to achieve a certain lifestyle. And so much of that pressure comes from what we see online. Totally.
And the podcast points out that chasing shortcuts for money, it doesn't usually end up with you being happy. They bring up a proverb, Proverbs 10.2.
Yeah.
It says, ill-gotten treasures have no lasting value, but righteousness delivers from death.
Pretty deep, huh? Makes you wonder, is that quick cash really worth giving up your integrity?
Definitely something to think about, especially these days when you've got things like predatory loans and all these schemes promising to make you rich quick. It's all over the place.
It's like that story of Esau selling his birthright for a bowl of stew.
Oh, yeah.
He was starving. Wanted that instant satisfaction.
Yeah.
But in the end, he traded something super valuable for just a moment of pleasure. And I feel like that happens a lot today, too. People racking up credit card debt, getting involved in things they shouldn't just for that quick buck.
Yeah, and that's where this whole idea of biblical wisdom comes in. Like the podcast really pushes this idea of defining your worth as something more than just your stuff. I like that. But how do they suggest we actually do that? It's not easy, right? Like our culture is constantly telling us that we are what we own.
Well, they bring up this passage from 1 Corinthians 6.19-20,
Okay.
where it says, our bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit. It's a reminder that we're not things to be used or exploited just to make money.
That's a powerful way to look at it.
Yeah.
Your worth. It's not tied to your paycheck, your stuff, or how many likes you get on social media. It comes from something deeper. Because you are you.
You hit it right on the head. That can be really freeing, especially in a world that's always telling you that success equals money.
So then, if we're not supposed to be chasing that fast cash or comparing ourselves based on what we own, where do we find that sense of security, that feeling of being enough?
The podcast argues that real security comes from trusting in God, trusting that he will provide and seeking fulfillment in things that go beyond just material possessions.
That's interesting. But how do you actually live that out?
Yeah.
We'll still got to get paid, right?
Exactly. But they challenge us to change how we define enough. They point to this verse, Philippians 4.19.
Got it.
It says, and my God will meet all your needs according to the riches of his glory in Christ Jesus.
It's like saying God will provide what you need. Not necessarily every single thing you want.
Right.
And it's about realizing that real wealth, it's not about the number in your bank account. It's about how rich your relationship with God is and with the people around you.
Exactly. And that's huge, especially when so many young people are struggling just to make ends meet.
I'm totally hooked.
Yeah.
So what else does this podcast suggest for staying grounded and not compromising your values when things are financially tight?
Well, they talk about challenging all those lies we hear about overconsumption, especially the stuff we're bombarded with on social media. All those messages saying you need the newest phone, the coolest clothes, the perfect life.
Oof, it's so easy to fall into that trap. You scroll through Instagram and suddenly you feel like a failure because you don't have that new car or you haven't been on some fancy vacation.
Exactly. And the podcast reminds us that social media doesn't show the whole picture. It's like everyone's highlight reel.
Yeah, it's like they say, the grass isn't always greener on the other side. It's just a filter.
Love that. And it's crazy. The podcast even mentions how some influencers are starting to push back against this whole materialistic, over-the-top culture.
Right.
Some are even quitting social media altogether, choosing to focus on things that are more real and lasting.
You mean like getting regular jobs? It's almost like things are starting to shift.
Yeah.
Like what does real success actually look like?
Yeah.
Is it that influence your life? Or is it about finding satisfaction in things that money can't buy?
That's a great question, and one we'll definitely keep exploring.
Yeah.
But first, we need to talk about another important piece of advice from the podcast, the importance of community.
Okay, tell me more. Because honestly, sometimes it feels like everyone's just out for themselves,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to money.
It's true. Our culture can be super individualistic.
Sure.
But the podcast argues that surrounding yourself with people who share your values, that's
Yeah.
crucial, especially when you're under financial pressure.
It's like having your own support system.
Yeah,
People who get it, who won't judge you for your struggles, and who can offer encouragement and even help you out.
absolutely. And you know what? The podcast even highlights how being part of a community can help you resist those temptations to compromise.
How's that?
When you're with people who encourage you to live with integrity, it becomes easier to make choices that match your values, even when it's hard.
That makes sense. It's
You-
like having a safety net,
Mhm.
people who will catch you when you fall and remind you of who you are when you start to get lost in the chase for money and status.
Exactly.
I love it. Community is key.
Yeah.
But, okay, this is giving me a lot to think about. We've got tons more to unpack from this episode.
Yeah, we do.
I think we need to take a quick break and come back for round 2 of this deep dive. Don't go anywhere.
You know, it's really cool how this podcast episode blends practical money advice with spiritual guidance. It's not just about the numbers. It's about making your money choices match your faith.
It's like, hey, your wallet and your soul are connected. But how do you actually live that? Where do you even start?
They talk about the importance of gratitude. Like,
Hmm.
it's easy to focus on what we don't have, especially when money's tight.
Mm.
But if we shift our focus to what we do have, it changes everything.
I can see that. If you're always comparing yourself to others and wishing you had their stuff,
Yeah.
you're never going to feel content, no matter how much money you make.
Right. And that feeling of not having enough, that can lead us down a bad path, make us more likely to compromise our values just to make a quick buck.
So how do we get that gratitude, especially when things are tough? Do we just like make a list of what we're thankful for?
That's a good first step, but it's more than just making a list. It's about really acknowledging and appreciating those blessings in your everyday life. It could be as simple as enjoying your coffee in the morning, taking a walk outside, having a good conversation with a friend.
It's like finding those little moments of joy instead of always wanting more.
Exactly. And when you focus on the simple joys, you start to see that real happiness doesn't come from your job title or how much stuff you own.
It's like that saying, money can't buy happiness, but it can buy a jet ski. And have you ever seen anyone sad on a jet ski? Okay, maybe that's not the best example, but you know what I mean.
I appreciate the humor.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's about finding joy in experiences and relationships, not just things.
And speaking of experiences, the podcast also talks about redefining success. Like they're making us question that whole American dream idea, you know, the big house, the fancy car, the perfect family.
Totally. They encourage people to think about what success really means to them, not what society tells them it should be.
It's like defining success on your own terms, based on what you value and what you're passionate about,
Yeah.
not on someone else's definition.
Exactly. It could mean having a career that you really care about, having strong relationships, making a difference in your community, or just living a life that feels authentic and true to yourself.
It's about focusing on what truly matters, instead of getting caught up in that rat race of chasing what everyone else is doing.
Absolutely. And you know what? The podcast even suggests that sometimes saying no to opportunities that seem successful on the surface can actually be a sign of real success.
You mean like those influencers who are leaving social media to do something else?
Exactly. Like they're saying, hey, having millions of followers and a closet full of designer clothes doesn't necessarily mean you're happy.
It's a powerful message, especially for young people who are constantly being told what success should look like.
For sure.
So, if we're not chasing those traditional markers of success, how do we stay motivated and focused on our goals?
The podcast suggests finding your motivation in your faith.
Okay, but what does that actually look like? Does it mean praying for a raise?
Not necessarily. It's more about making sure your goals match your values and asking for guidance from God.
So it's about trusting that God will give you the opportunities and resources you need to live out your purpose, even if it doesn't look exactly like you planned.
Exactly. And that trust can give you a lot of strength and resilience, especially when you're facing financial problems or setbacks.
This is making me think about that whole idea of relying on your community. Because honestly, sometimes you need more than just faith to get through tough times. You need practical help, encouragement, and maybe even a little tough love from the people who care about you.
That's so true. The podcast really stresses the importance of being around people who will support you both financially and spiritually.
It's like having a team of cheerleaders and accountability partners all in one.
Exactly. They can offer advice,
Good.
help
Yeah.
you out, and remind you of what's important when you're tempted to make a bad choice.
Okay, I'm sold. Community is key.
Yeah.
But how do you find those people? especially if you're new to a place or feeling a little lost in life?
That's a great question, and one we should definitely dig into more. But first, let's take a moment to think about what we've talked about so far. This podcast episode has some really practical advice for staying true to your faith and values, even when money's tight.
It's like a roadmap for figuring out those tricky spots where faith and money intersect. But I feel like this journey isn't over yet. We still have a lot to talk about, right?
Definitely. We still need to explore how to actually apply these biblical principles to our everyday lives.
Okay, I'm ready to dive back in. But let's take a quick break and come back for the final part of this deep dive. All right, they're back and ready to finish up this deep dive into staying true to your faith when money's tight. We've covered gratitude, community, redefining success. It's a lot. But how do we actually make it all happen in real life? It can't just be about good intentions, right?
You're totally right. It's about actually doing something, making choices that line up with your values, even when it's hard. The podcast really stresses this idea of being aware, noticing those times when you're about to make a compromise, whether it's buying something you can't afford or taking that opportunity that just feels a little shady.
So it's about being mindful, taking a second to think before you do something you might regret.
Exactly. Ask yourself, does this match what I believe in? Is this going to help me build the life I want? Or is it just a quick fix that'll cause problems later? It's about looking past that instant gratification and thinking about the long game.
It's like that marshmallow experiment.
Mm-hmm.
Can you resist eating one marshmallow right now so you can get two later? It's about being patient and trusting that waiting will pay off.
I like that. And don't forget, you're not alone in this. The podcast talks a lot about the importance of community, having people you can go to for advice, encouragement, or just a reality check when you need it.
It's like having a support system for your finances and your faith. People who are cheering you on, keeping you accountable, and helping you stay grounded when it's easy to get tempted.
Yeah. And sometimes just talking to someone who understands what you're going through, that can make all the difference. It can help you see things more clearly, get a new perspective, and make the best choices for you, both with your money and your faith.
So awareness, community.
Mm-hmm.
What else? Any other tips for staying true to yourself when things get tough?
The podcast talks about finding that solid ground, something deeper than trends and stuff that you buy.
Okay, that sounds deep.
Yeah.
But what does that mean in everyday life? Do you have to go meditate on a mountain or something?
Not exactly. It could be spending time in nature, connecting with your faith through prayer or reading the Bible, doing something creative, or just doing things that bring you joy and peace.
It's about finding the things that nourish your soul, remind you what truly matters, no matter how much money you have.
Exactly. It's about building that inner peace and security that nothing can shake.
I love that. It's like building a strong foundation of faith and resilience that can withstand anything. And you know what? I think that's the heart of what we've been talking about this whole time. Real wealth isn't about dollars and cents. It's about the richness of your relationships, your values, and your connection to something bigger than yourself.
You said it perfectly. It's about knowing that your worth comes from who you are, not from your bank account or the things you own.
It's about finding joy in the journey, being thankful, leaning on your community, and trusting that you have the strength to get through anything without losing yourself.
And remember, you're not the only one going through this. Lots of people are facing these same challenges, trying to live a life with purpose and integrity, even when the world is telling them to take the easy way out.
That's so true. And to everyone listening, keep the faith starved. Keep looking for wisdom. And keep building a life that reflects your values, no matter what financial challenges come your way.
We're all in this together.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep seeking truth, keep seeking joy, and keep seeking connection.